In 1775, the Continental Congress created the Chaplain Corps. Under the command of General George Washington, each soldier was required to attend worship service every Sunday. While other armies advanced on their feet, Washington's troops advanced on their knees. It's time for the Chaplain's Report with Caleb Colquitt on tactics.
Chaplain's Report today, we're going to look in the book of Daniel, and I think that this is especially relevant. We did something with the book of Ruth. You may remember recently we did a series on her and her life and her whole backstory with Naomi and Boaz and how everything worked out. I think I'd really like to do something similar to that, and so today we're going to be starting a series on Daniel. Daniel, of course, being a prophet of God that you can find in the Old Testament, and I highly recommend you, if you're going to be looking at these, read through the whole scripture and read through the book of Daniel. It won't take you very long at all, and you'll get a better idea of where we're going with this. So let's look right now at Daniel 1. So just to set the stage a little bit, Daniel has three friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and he and these three friends have sort of bound together because they are Jews being held captive in Babylon. So Babylon went and they conquered Judea, and they took some of the best looking, the smartest, basically the cream of the crop, the best of the best, and they took them out of Jerusalem and are now preparing some of those young men for service to the king. So they have these teenage boys that they're trying to get ready for a life of servitude in Babylon. And they want these kids to be educated. They want them to be, healthy and everything else. And so part of their policy in this is to not only incorporate Babylonian education into their lives, but they also want to incorporate essentially every aspect of their lifestyle and make it Babylonian and not Jewish. And one of the ways that they do that is they control their diet. So if you are a Jewish person living in Babylon, this becomes a problem because there are certain laws, according to the book of Exodus and Leviticus, there are certain things you're not allowed to eat. And of course, none of this stuff is going to be killed by a rabbi. And so when you're looking at the meat in this place, this is going to be something that you as a Jewish person cannot follow the law of Moses and continue to eat this. And so what happens is you've got these people that are saying, this is the diet you're going to have now. And we're going to see how Daniel and his friends sort of react to this. That just kind of helps you understand where they're coming from. So in Daniel 1, verse 8, but Daniel made up his mind that he would not defile himself with the king's choice food or the wine which he drank. So he sought permission from the commander of the officials that he might not defile himself. So there's a couple things that we really need to unpack there. First of all, this is how Daniel and his company prepared for temptation. Keep in mind, these are not adult men. These are teenage boys, which indicates to me they have a very strong faith-oriented family life. Because without that, there is no way that they came to this conviction. Without having strong parents, people that taught them the law of Moses, taught them how to conduct themselves in public, to conduct themselves with others, there's no way they arrive at this conclusion. I love the word it uses here. I think the King James says purposed in his heart. But it means the same thing. It's just a more elegant way of saying made up his mind. This is how they prepare for temptation. They know temptation is coming. They know it's going to be a problem. So what they do is they prepare ahead of time before the situation arises that they are not going to defile themselves, that they're going to live according to God's law, that they are not going to sin, they are not going to partake of the king's food. And then when that particular situation arises, where the commander says, here, this is going to be what you're going to eat from now on, they all with conviction say, no, we're not going to defile ourselves. That is not what we're going to do. God's law says we're not allowed to eat certain things, and because of that, we intend to follow God's law. Think about how many sins would be staved off completely if more people took the same stance that Daniel and his friends here did. If they decided ahead of time, we are making up our minds now that we will not engage in sinful activity. See, because here's the thing. You never want to have to make a plan on the battlefield as the battle's happening. That's not a good plan. Or if it is a good plan, it was something that was reached in haste, which means that there's probably some blind spots. Whenever you're in a battle And the Bible very often equates what we're going through with sin and temptation as a spiritual battle against darkness. Whenever you're in a battle, the worst thing you can do is to go in and say, you know what, we'll just wing it. We'll just figure it out as we go along. Not a good idea. Because if you're there in the moment having to make that decision, when the heat is up and the pressure's on, maybe you wind up making a good decision, but odds are you don't. For example, if you are going to a bar and you know that you struggle with alcoholism and that alcohol is a temptation for you, and you know that if you partake of it, you're probably going to get drunk, you don't decide once you get to the bar, okay, I should probably not drink alcohol, because once you're there and your buddies are there and everybody's having a good time, it's really hard to say no then. What you want to do is you want to make up your mind ahead of time to either not go to the bar at all, which would probably be the best idea, or you make up your mind ahead of time, if I'm going to be around people that are going to be drinking, like at a Christmas party or something, you make up your mind ahead of time, I'm not going to engage in that activity. Because if you start trying to make up your mind while you're there, then it becomes a lot more problematic. Then you're a lot more likely to say, yeah, I'll go ahead and do it. And I also want to talk about their conviction here, because giving in was easily the path of least resistance. That would have been the much easier route for Daniel and his friends to go. Because as human beings, we tend to rationalize things in our own mind. Let's say you're Daniel in this situation. You're a Jewish person, you believe that it's morally wrong to partake of these things, to defy the law of Moses. You're thinking, well, yeah, but we've been taken captive, and he's the king, and if we refuse, he could kill us, which he could have done. And yet, Daniel and his friends, knowing that's a possibility, sit down and say, doesn't matter. Doesn't matter, we're doing what God says. Yeah, it puts us in danger. Yeah, we may have to face some consequences for this. We may have to suffer from persecution, but you know what? Doing God's will is that important to us. Doing what God told us to do is just that important to us, that we're willing to risk that. You've got to admire that kind of conviction. And it's the same kind of conviction that we as Christians are called to have. That God knows situations are going to show up where it would be easy to justify in our own mind or from our human perspective why we need to go ahead and make an exception. Why we need to go ahead and defy God's law just this once, or maybe just these few times. But when it's all said and done, at the end of the day, what we're supposed to do is exactly what Daniel and his friends did, which is do the right thing, follow God's law, and have faith that he's going to work it all out. That he will provide a way for us to be in accordance to his law and to continue to be in his good favor. Now, that may mean something pretty severe. For all we know, that may mean even our death in some cases, in the most extreme cases. But nonetheless, if we have faith that God is going to be there, he's going to take care of us, then even death is a consequence that we should be able to accept. If it's between death and defying God's law, we should be the kind of people that have the conviction like Daniel and his friends that go with, you know what, we'll take death over defying God's law. That's okay with us. So this is a kind of conviction that you have to greatly admire, especially in young people like this. You never want to get in the mentality of, oh, God's going to understand. God will understand me missing church this one time. God will understand me, well, just having some social drinks and only getting drunk in that context. God will understand me using foul language this one time. God will understand me getting rough with my wife. I mean, he would understand that situation. No. God gives us specific commands for a reason. And when it comes to treating our brothers and sisters the way that we ought to and helping them, God's not going to understand us being derelict in our duties and ignoring the teachings of Christ when it comes to that. Because God understands better than anybody that humans, by our very nature, are frail, weak creatures. And to stand against the darkness, to stand against sin and temptation, we have to do what Daniel did and prepare ahead of time and set our minds in such a way ahead of time that we are already convinced we will not enter into that sin. We have to make a plan, dedicate ourselves to that plan, and have the moral, righteous conviction to make sure that we are in compliance with God's law in all things, just like he did. Stay the course, friends. you know, you really should like this video and subscribe to the Tactics YouTube channel. What's that? Oh, you want to know what the content's going to be? You want to know what's in it? No, it's like Obamacare. So you got to subscribe to find out what's in it.